Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar. Today is June 17th, 2020. If you are new here, welcome. And if you are returning here, welcome. So I got started a little early tonight because I guess I just figured why not. So we'll see if anybody hops on. How is everybody doing? What is new in your world? Jack is here. Karina's here. Hello, hello. Anita. Ran Lion. Dave says hello from Liverpool, England. Hello. Ed from Alberta. Missouri Cowboy says present. Oh no. Jack says I'm doing terrible. What's going on, Jack? Kenneth Shaw. Hi, Ken. UNA says hi, Dana. Hello, hello. Kamami says bonsoir, les amis. I probably butchered that. I apologize. Good evening, my friends. I know that much. That's all I got. My French is very limited. Well, here in Michigan, they just extended the stay-at-home orders for another week. So that's going to be interesting. They keep getting pushed back. But it looks like kind of across the US, COVID, they're seeing some spikes. So that's concerning. Jack says he tried to say hi yesterday, but he thinks he is shadow banned. Are you talking about over on Angie's channel? I will say there's a weird thing that's going on, and I didn't notice. I don't even know how long it's been going on for, because I just noticed it, and we all know it sometimes takes me it takes me a little while to notice things. But YouTube started doing this thing where it will hold comments in the chat. It'll what would be the word? Like mute them so you can't see them. Hide them, I guess. It'll hide them, and then so from my end or from Angie's end, we have to go in there and it'll show it all grayed out, and we have to click either show or hide to approve it. So that's weird. And I don't know if, I mean, I'm sure that's something in the settings. So it might have been, if you've found that happening, it might have been like a word you said that tripped it. I've seen a couple comments from people that seem fine to me. I don't know why they're getting caught in that filter, but yeah, who knows? Yeah, Jack was saying that might explain a few things. I could see my own comments, but it was like no one could see me at all. Yeah, I'm not sure. And I'm like, there's words that I can type in for the comment filter for YouTube where it'll hold those comments, not live chat comments, but just regular comments. And normally I'll just put in there stuff that certain words that are basically a scam or really vile or lewd. I'll put those in the filter to hold those, and then I'll go through periodically. I haven't in a long time, but periodically I'll go through and then manually approve or decline those comments. Kimberly's here, says, I hope you all are doing good. Oh boy. UNA says, hi. Yeah, happy messed. Um, yeah, messed up lately. Got another layer torn off. Happy, then empty. Hmm. Is that anything you'd like to share in more detail? If not, that's fine too. Kenneth says, I work for the prison system. I don't usually go out in uniform, but if I need to stop and get food or gasoline on the way to or from work, I honestly am scared. Yeah, I don't blame you. It's uncertain times. Yeah, he says it's a frightening time to be in any type of law enforcement. Yeah, I can imagine it would be. Let's see, Jack saying his grandmother passed away and he doesn't want to go to another family funeral and watch a bunch of toxic family of origin antics. So what is the plan? What do you think you're going to do? Ava says hi. Hello. Sarit says so glad to catch you live. Marie says I'm hopping on. Hello everyone. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so here's my question for you guys. What do you think would have expedited your healing and understanding? Like if you could go back in time, if you had a magic wand and could go back in time, what kind of anything, what type of videos or books or um, content in general do you think would have helped? And would there be certain topics? Ava says examples like you have in your books. Okay, that's good feedback. UNA says, oh, I got some guilt removed. Found out I didn't, oh gosh, found out I didn't exist, so didn't need to keep the guilt. Felt freeing, but that which described me has also disappeared. Getting better isn't easy. That sounds very intense. Let's see. Bonnie says, boundaries and self-love. Yeah, two fantastic topics. Two important ones. I agree. I think that would be helpful. So information surrounding boundaries and self-love with um, examples, and David saying, looking back, awareness as to what narcissism was in the first place. Cool. Sarit, cool. Thank you. Says, you really changed my life. I'm learning to react less and less. Yes, boundaries and self-love saves. Kenneth says, your videos would have helped. Also, someone focusing on narcissistic abuse from family members. Okay, so a more extensive overview of all of the different ways that, uh, yeah, narcissistic abuse can happen. It's like at work, between friends, family members, men, women. Okay. Let's see, let me scroll up here. Oh boy. Ava says, my close friend, wait, let me back up. Did I get the start of it? Okay. It says, my close friend, who was also the bridesmaid at my wedding, I found out from another close friend that she was still friends with my ex narcissist on Facebook, and that she had liked his photos. I asked her about it, and she said that it was to keep the peace because he had liked some of her photos too. That's awkward and uncomfortable. Have you said anything to her about it? Do you plan on it? And if so, how do you think you're going to handle that? Oh, thanks, Kenneth. He says, Dana, I went no contact with my abusive family member. It wasn't well received by the rest of the family, which made me feel guilty. Your videos helped validate me and remove the guilt. Thank you. Oh, you are so welcome. And I'm so glad that these videos were able to help you with that. Ava says, with her friend, I asked her the next day to delete him and she didn't answer me. She felt it was dramatic that my other friend told me that. It's such a difficult situation, isn't it? Um, I just don't know if people understand if they're not on the receiving end of this kind of treatment, how hurtful that is. Like, it's not just oh, we went two separate ways in our life. It was this person like violated me. They abused me and caused severe damage to me. And I just don't understand how you can be friends with somebody that we're supposed to be good friends, that would hurt me like that. I just don't understand. Um, yeah, it's that's difficult. Missouri Cowboy says a clarified definition of what a narcissist is and how they manipulate, which I think you did an excellent job doing in your first book. Thank you. So kind of like an overview of, um, yeah, I guess the terminology and then the application of it all is what I'm getting here from you guys. Ava says she ended up deleting my friend off of Facebook, a mutual friend we have both known since high school. She lied and said she had no access to her phone, which was a lie. She only met him a handful of times. She lied to me, but she just had a baby and she is stressed out. I don't know if I should trust her now. She crossed a boundary. This is where I get confused with boundaries. You know, you bring up this whole situation brings up a really great point because it's there's not necessarily a cut and dry right or wrong with most situations in life, really, especially this kind of a thing. So you could handle this in a multitude of ways. You could say, um, you could assert yourself with her and say, um, I basically this person really profoundly hurt you and you just don't understand how they could be friends, and it's just really hurtful that, and like you realize they're just friends on Facebook, um, all that, but it's still, it hurts you knowing that. And if she doesn't do anything, then kind of thinking, okay, well, how big of a deal is this and for you? And what do you want to do then? For me personally, I had to cut out a ton of people that were still on good terms with both of the men that were absolutely horrible to me. So I just and I guess my thinking too was, uh, I want my friends to have my back 100%, A, and B, if they can still be friends with somebody who did something like that to anybody, I don't really think I wanna be friends with them. Like, I don't to me, there's not a lot of, like, blurred line, like, there's not a lot of gray area there. I wouldn't be friends with somebody who had abused somebody, anybody, but that I knew of, or knew about. That's very true. David says, "I think the friends see the mask, and that's the reality to them. They don't see what you saw." Yes, I agree completely. And Ava says, she knew firsthand what he had done to me. She was talking to me day in and day out. That's why I was shocked. She'd only met him 4 times. Yeah, that's wild. I don't know. I don't know what would possess somebody to do something like that. Let's see. That's interesting, Kenneth. He says, Dana, I saw a public service announcement of a guy who was abusing his girlfriend, but he was looking at himself from outside the window, banging loudly, screaming at himself to stop. Do you think a lot of abusers just lack awareness? Like if they realized they were being abusive, maybe they would stop. I think their level of awareness and entitlement is on a spectrum. That's just from what I've noticed. So a lot of them, if their level of entitlement is high, then their level of um, um, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the trouble that they're having with their behavior, the discomfort that they're having with their behavior is going to be low. So, uh, and that goes for most of us, right? If we feel entitled, if we feel justified in our actions, we feel like that was deserved, then we don't feel remorse or guilt because we feel like we're doing the right thing. And for a lot of abusive people, they feel like they're doing the right thing. Um, but that goes back to it's not just their behavior that's the problem, it's the mindset. And it's the lack of emotional maturity that goes along with that. So that's the bigger problem. I know of, there's definitely a segment of abusive people out there who feel horrible about their behavior uh, after the fact. Although I don't know how much of that is sincere regret, but I know that there is a segment where they want to stop. And I think it's more so because it's the consequences that they're going to be facing. Their partner is going to leave them. There's legal consequences, um, you know, those kinds of things. To what degree of a change are they actually motivated to make? That's anyone's guess. I think some people, like Kenneth, you're saying, if they realized they were being abusive, maybe they would stop. The challenge with that is you have to kind of circumvent a person's defensiveness and their level of justification for their own behavior. And that the hard thing is all people, all of us are wired to to do to do what we think is right and to kind of double down on that. We know people don't like being wrong, is what I'm trying to say. We have a really difficult time. We all have a very difficult time with admitting it. And if you can think about how difficult that is just for for you, for us, um, and then multiply that you know, significantly for somebody else who does not have that self-awareness or that emotional maturity. And most people, again, like when they're backed into a corner and they're being told what you're doing is wrong, it's a problem, the natural reaction is defensiveness. Even with constructive criticism, people tend to get very defensive, even if it's mild constructive criticism, people get defensive. So that's the challenge with getting through to somebody who has a multitude of, um, abusive behavior is getting around that defensiveness and breaking down their justifications, and while maintaining rapport and and then kind of allowing them to save face almost by giving them an alternative. So I think there's a lot of I think it's possible. It requires a very, I think, methodical approach to it, and it's a lot right now there is no, like, program that I think effectively handles this issue, the issue of abuse in general, because there's so many different facets to it. Sometimes it's culture, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's, um, the way a person was raised. So just kind of generational mindsets of entitlement or the understanding, just really dysfunctional ideas of the roles of children or the roles of women or men or you name it. And it just requires a massive amount of work to get in and turn a person around 180 degrees, even if they really want it, because behavior, it trickles over. Like, that mindset isn't just compartmentalized, it's in everything. So it's not going to be just changing one behavior, it's just changing their whole world of view. It's a massive undertaking, and like I said, so far it's not done effectively. There are like abusive, um like reoffender programs that are oftentimes court ordered for people, that tend to be like, I don't know, anywhere from like a 6 week to a 3 month program. But again, the success rates with those are very low. And I sat through one training for one when I was working at a domestic violence shelter, and I found myself just I like, and I had no reason to, like, I was getting defensive and was annoyed with the guy. And I'm all for, like, abuse prevention, but it was just his approach. He just was everything. I don't know, it was just his personality was just really off-putting for me, and I just thought, "Oh my god, there's no way this message is gonna go over well with, a bunch of guys who," and it's mainly men that go into these programs, but also abusive people. It's not gonna go over well with a bunch of abusive people who don't wanna be there, if it's not going over well with domestic violence staff. Uh, so Ava, okay, so that you bring up a great follow-up point to that, who says, "I'm afraid that if I'm very solid with my deal breakers and boundaries, I will drop people like nothing." Yes, and so what um oh, you're full of great points tonight, Ava. Um, what you're referring to, this ability to, like, drop people like nothing, it's often referred to as fortressing. So, it's basically where a person's boundaries and standards I would say boundaries and standards are so rigid that there's everything is cut and dry. You're in or you're out. And oftentimes what happens after abuse is that when a person there's this learning process, right? Of, like, learning all of these new skills, and learning boundaries and assertiveness and effective communication and all of that is part of it, as well as realizing that, um, the world is full of a lot of different people, and, 5 to 10% of them are dangerous. So, that not everybody is like you. Um, And so when we don't know all of that, what people tend to do in order to keep themselves safe is to have really rigid deal breakers. It's, "Oh, so you did something I didn't like. We're done," kind of a thing. Now, with that said, oftentimes too, a lot of people that are out of abusive relationships have a lot of house cleaning to do. There's a lot of, um, problematic relationships in their life with family, with friends, with coworkers, because they maybe didn't know how to be selective. There's a lot of things going on. They might not have realized that it's normal and healthy and appropriate to have different circles that we place people into, and that your inner circle is a spot that's uh, that needs to be guarded and valued, and somebody has to work their way into that spot. It's not just, "Oh, hey, there's an open seat here. Come on over." It's they earn that spot based off of trust and appropriate behavior over time. And so there's a lot of, like, reshuffling that tends to happen after an abusive relationship, um, and that can really make a person question themselves. It can make other people question them, but really it's that reshuffling is, it's a natural part of the process when you start doing things differently and you start working on the way that you communicate with others changes. And here's the thing too with boundaries is it's it can be very difficult and challenging to set boundaries, to go back and reset boundaries with people that are already in your life. It's significantly easier to just start fresh. I'm not advocating that you start fresh. I'm just saying this is part of why I think people tend to do a lot of housekeeping, because there can be so much resistance from other people. That dynamic is, and if you think of a dynamic as a dance, it's kind of this standard analogy that's used here, or the metaphor. It's this dynamic between two people, and two people are used to moving in a certain way together. And when one person stops, the other person doesn't know what to do and they get upset. So if you've told a friend for the past 10 years, if you've just been very people pleasing and said yes far more often than you said no, and they know you this way. And then if you start changing your boundaries and start asserting yourself and, you know, making your opinion known or saying no more often, they might feel, and oftentimes people do, like, oh, did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? Why are you being this way? And it changes the dynamic. And some people can adjust and some people can't. So, and really too, it's kind of just this natural evolution in general. Whenever there are changes made in a person's life, those around them are oftentimes reshuffled. You think about the transition from graduating from high school. That's probably a very accurate example. People tend to go in a multitude of ways. And um and then they pair up based off of what they have in common at this stage in their life. For those that get married or have kids, they tend to gravitate towards each other because they're at the same stage in life. Those that are going to college tend to hang out with other people that are going into college because they're at that same stage in life. Or if they go into the military or if they're going to a trade school or what have you, because you have more in common with these kinds of people, with the people that are at the same place where you are in your life. So it can be very unsettling after abuse to go through that reshuffling process. This is why I also encourage people to be actively expanding their social circle during this process. It's a great way to try out, to practice being assertive with people that you're just meeting for the first time, and you know to start practicing setting these boundaries and um, interacting with people in a much more balanced way. Ava says, I'm so confused. I do not know who to trust. I'm so angry at my ex for getting me to trust him and then discarding me. That's very common. It's one of the most common questions asked. So, as far as trust goes, one of the biggest things is people feel like, man, um, they get so angry about with the process of healing, with being abused, with all of that. They're like, man, I feel so broken. I can't trust the way I used to trust. What's wrong with me? How do I get back there? How do I trust like I used to trust again? And I will tell you just from my experience and from watching countless others go through it as well, the big takeaway is that we were never building trust appropriately to begin with. I would say at least the vast majority of us weren't. Because society teaches you like we're all kind of indoctrinated into this belief system of, oh, you need to trust like you've never been hurt before, you need to love like you've never been hurt, you trust a person until they do you wrong, kind of a thing. And that's terrible advice. This doesn't mean that we have to walk around completely guarded and paranoid, but there's a lot to be said for having a healthy degree of skepticism and caution when interacting with new people. The reality is we don't know. We don't know these people. It takes appropriate trust is something that's built over time by appropriate behavior. It's not something that's just freely and blindly given off the bat. It takes time. We read a book in book club. I don't even, gosh, it was a while ago. It was by Brene Brown. It was called Daring Greatly. And in that book, she gave such a great analogy for building trust. And she had one of her children when they were in elementary school. The teacher had a marble jar. You might have had this too when you were in school. And for every time the teacher kind of caught the class doing something right and being well behaved, she would drop a marble into the jar. And every time the class was acting up, she would take a marble out. And the goal was once the jar was full, they'd have a pizza party. And building trust, and so Brene Brown was saying, building trust is exactly that way. There is no shortcut. It just takes time and appropriate actions. So a person's behaving appropriately, like in a way and when I say appropriately, uh, they're behaving in a way that's conducive to like building emotional and physical safety. So for example, you tell them a secret, they keep your secret. You loan them $5, they repay you $5. You they're proving, hey, you can count on me, you can rely on me. And so every time that you place a little bit of trust in them and they do well with it, then you just keep doing that until the level of things that you're trusting them with becomes more and more significant over time. But there is no shortcut to that process. And so a mistake that a lot of us made was that we mistook a person's niceness for their goodness. So for the real charming, manipulative people out there, they're so likable and charismatic. It's easy to think, oh, well, they're just so enjoyable. Like I feel they must be a good person. And part of that too is we all think that we could spot a dangerous person. And the vast majority of time we're wrong. I mean, any of us can spot the wolves in wolves clothing out there. That's, that's a slow pitch. But it's the wolves in sheep's clothing that's the problem. And sometimes it just takes time. Sometimes it just takes time. And sometimes a person, can say and do all of the right things, and you can just get completely caught off guard and have the rug pulled out from underneath you. That happens too. But it's a lot less of a chance if we go slow and really pay attention to um, their actions and their accountability over time. Does that help? Huh. Megalodora says the smart wolves dress like the shepherd. Yeah, boy, isn't that the truth. I've never heard that said like that, but you're right. I will say, too, one of the things that used to give me a lot of anxiety, um, with this channel and with my support group and everything is I remember I was in Colorado, I was visiting my mom, and I had it's like 2 people in like a 2 or 3-day span mentioned that they wanted to get my old logo tattooed on them. And it because I mean, frank it was a cool logo, frankly, okay? I didn't come up with it, another member of the community came up with it. It was awesome. And I was kinda joking around with my mom because she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I think I'm starting a cult." Like, I didn't, there's people that wanna get tattoos of the logo, and I was kinda laughing about it, but then I was like, "You know what? But really, this isn't funny because that's how I think a lot of these things start." And then it started giving me all this anxiety, like, what if I become like this cult leader and I don't want to be a cult leader. I don't want anybody to follow me. But how do I how do I handle this and how do I shape this to where um because it's the perfect space. You've got a bunch of vulnerable people. It would be very easy for um a dangerous or destructive person to come in and really twist things around and get everybody all tangled up. And so I had to do a lot of kind of soul checking and double checking and talk to quite a few people about how do we um kind of how do we how do we prevent this? Like what is the difference between a support group and a cult? I know that might sound really silly, but I think a lot of times groups that become cultish start off with good intentions. Anyways, long story short, the lesson learned in all of that was that the main difference between like a group and a cult is free will. And so since I really got clear about that, I try to always remind myself it's about my goal with everything everybody does in general is that you are making the best decision for you, because 'cause you're the one that has to live with the consequences. You're making the best decision that you can based off of the information that you have, and that I'm not telling people what to do. So, it helped to change my approach a little bit because as a fellow survivor, you get I still catch myself. I'll see stuff in the chat and I'll just wanna tell a person, "Oh, you need to leave or run," or, this, that, or the other, and it's not helpful. It might be in the short term, but then the long term, then you've got people that are looking to you for the answers or not even just you or me, they're looking outside of themselves for the answer. And the whole a big part of healing is to learn how to become like your own safe space and to turn inward for validation and the answers. Mm. Free Indeed says, my 8-year-old daughter has a 5-week out of state visit with my ex, who's a covert narcissist, and his wife. What will they do to her? They're quarantined. How can I prepare her? I guess my question is this her first visit to them? 5 weeks is an awful long time. Has she ever been away, especially for an 8-year-old? Has she ever been away from home for 5 weeks before? Okay, and while you're answering that, I would say at a minimum, I'm just gonna make some assumptions here. I'm assuming that they have technology, that she'll have access to a phone, that she'll have access to a computer or like an iPad or something like that. At a minimum, I would encourage phone calls once or twice a day. I would encourage Skype or Zoom calls So you can FaceTime or whatever it's called with her. Um, and I guess too, I would want to know, what is her relationship with her father and the stepmom, and um, what are her concerns as well. So, and have they ever been abusive to her before? If any of that is the case, then I would say it could help to kind of come up with a code word. So I don't like puppy or uh, thunderstorm. I don't know. Just words that aren't that out of the ordinary, but aren't that frequently used either. That she could kind of signal to you if things aren't going well. But again, I don't know the full dynamic between them, and what your daughter's concerns are, and all that. Ava says, I feel like I just need to redo my entire life. Well, you might need to, and that might not be a bad thing. People joke about it's kind of like midlife crisis, having a midlife crisis or whatever. But I think when people go through that, it's, and I don't even know how old you are, but I think most people tend to, between like 35 and 45, go through kind of this redoing of things, because how to really be in tune with yourself is not something that's taught. And so we all kind of do the best we can with the information that we have. This oftentimes leads people into jobs that are not fulfilling, marriages that are not fulfilling or that are flat out abusive, kind of friends based off of how long they've known a person, not based off of how they're being treated or what they have in common now. So their whole life isn't really, just it's like different degrees of not working for them. And then they kind of reach this point where they're like, God, what am I doing? And the clock is ticking, and I just don't, my life needs a massive overhaul. And so that's a big part of it. So when people, they do come out on the other side of abuse, and they're starting to learn about boundaries and standards and deal breakers and getting in tune with themselves, and what all that actually means, and realizing that it's completely normal and healthy and appropriate to have thoughts and opinions and wants and needs, and uh, to have this level of autonomy to be yourself. uh, it's like they kind of spread their wings for the first time. And that's when things really radically begin to change. So there's an exercise that I have mentioned before on here. This was a game changer for me. And I think it has been for a lot of people as well. So here's the exercise. Think of a scale from 0 to 10. 10 being absolute, like hell yes. 0 being hell no. And 5 being lukewarm. And start off in areas of places that you're not heavily like emotionally invested. So maybe in your kitchen, or maybe, I don't know, in your bathroom, not in your closet. For most people, like their closet's a very emotional place. They have clothes of all different sizes. They have clothes of, people tend to buy clothes for this life that they hope to someday lead. So there can be all kinds of like shame and guilt and all kinds of emotions packed away in our closet. So start someplace that's not highly emotional. Like again, like your kitchen or your bathroom, and start looking around and ranking objects on this scale from 0 to 10, and getting curious about it. This isn't, and try to silence that critical voice of, oh, well, you should be grateful for everything. This is not about judgment. This is not about being appreciative or any of that. It's just, how do you feel about certain things. So for example, this is my red coffee mug. I've had this for a long time. I love this thing. This is, yeah, like a 9 or a 10 for me. I I love the size of it. I love the color of it. Uh, it just, I love it. It works. My phone case. This is my phone case. Um, this is, I don't know, maybe like a 6. It meets its purpose. It has old hair dye on the back of it. This uh toggle, I don't even know what you call these things. This toggle thing, the magnet on the back is way too strong and it just annoys me every single time I put it on the air vent thing to hold my phone while I'm driving. It's just it's frustrating. So, you know, it works. It's fine. Am I gonna get another one? Probably not anytime soon. Um, let's see. This little clock thing that I have here. This keeps me focused and on track. I love it. It's great if you have the attention span of a fruit fly like I do. I just think I've shown you guys this before. It's wonderful. Got it on Amazon. I think it was like 20 bucks. You just turn it on a side and it sets a timer instantly for 10, 20 minutes. Wonderful. It's like a Pomodoro type clock. Love it. Love it. That's a 10. Going around doing this, it is very eye-opening because then you start to realize, oh my gosh, why do I have things in my life that are really anything below an 8, an 8 or a 9? Like, why? Why? And sometimes you can't help it, right? Like, I'm not going to go spend another, I don't know, however much, 20 bucks on a phone case for one that I like that much more just because I'm kind of cheap like that. But it's also not, I don't know, maybe it would be worth the 20 bucks because it really does bother me like multiple times a day. It might be worth the 20 bucks. Um, but then thinking about that and then extending this same concept of the 0 to 10 in your to areas that you're more emotionally invested in, especially into like friendships and relationships. Where is this friendship? And then asking yourself what would need to happen? What would need to happen in order to make this a 9 or a 10? Like, what would that even look like in terms of everything, in terms of clothing, in terms of um, your self-care routine, in terms of friendship, in terms of your job, in terms of a relationship? Like, what would that look like? So the more that you're bringing self-awareness to your day-to-day life, the more self-awareness you're bringing into your life, the more your life starts to work because then your life becomes uh, you start living authentically. Like your life is an authentic reflection of who you are from moment to moment. It's not a life based off of default, off of shoulds or woulds or coulds or hopes. Like, oh, I hope someday, you know, I'll be this person, or that I don't know, fit into this outfit, or that like you're living in the present moment and you're at peace with the present moment because you know what's for you and you know what's not. And Marie Kondo, she really sums up this whole concept just very minimalistically and perfectly. She basically asks, she's like, go around your house asking yourself, does this spark joy? Does this spark joy? And if it doesn't spark joy for you, then maybe it's time to release that object and have that move on to the next person. So Ava says, yeah, Marie Kondo is awesome. Yes, she is. I love her. She's so cute. I love her approach to uh, keeping a tidy environment and how she interacts with the objects. Like, I love how when you realize, okay, this does no longer, this no longer sparks joy. Like, is no longer, um, this doesn't work for this chapter in my life. And to think about donating these items. And then she goes around and she thanks each of the items. Thank you. Like, thank you. You've served a wonderful purpose here. Like, you are very appreciated. I love that. I think that's such a beautiful way to think of objects that we encounter in our life. I like that. Okay. XOXO. Okay, I will check that out. Um, she says, Dana, my sister sent the recording of the abuse to you in an email. If you have time afterwards, check it out. Okay, I will, and I will email you guys back tonight or first thing in the morning. I also made some phone calls and I wanted to just touch base with you. Don't panic. It was just feeling some stuff out. No details were given or anything like that. Let's see. Elizabeth says, also, there's a time right after abuse that your brain asks you to isolate and process all of the new information you're getting. After that, you don't trust people right away, but trust your discernment. Yes, I really like that. And if you still don't trust your discernment, you can back it up even a little bit more and think about in terms of what nourishes you and what drains you. When do you feel comfortable and when do you feel uncomfortable? And trying to tie those feelings of comfort or discomfort into nourishing or draining. So, I'm trying to think of an example. If you spend time with the person, let's say, for example, and you come back and you're like, oh, I am just wiped out. That person just absolutely exhausts me. Okay, then that's a sign that something needs to change. And what needs to change is going to depend on, but you'll know, and it might take you a little bit of kind of figuring out, well, what does need to change? Do I need to maybe spend less time with them? Do I need at one time? Do I need to spend time with them in a different way? Do I need to, um, kind of what needs to happen in order for this to be like a nourishing exchange? And that's how we get into that alignment of, um, just kind of that living authentically. It's when your life starts to work for you. Like, you're not doing things begrudgingly, I guess. You're not doing things out of like fear, obligation, or guilt. You're doing things because this is nourishing for you. So yeah, it's a game changer when we start living our life like that. Magalodora says, Dana, what if you're not sure what joy feels like because you've never been allowed to feel it? Okay. I would start with a softer emotion. So step back a few paces from joy. So if it's not like euphoria, right? Like if it's not this intense feeling, then thinking about within that range of feelings that you have felt, contentment, ease, peace, happiness, um, you're feeling light, you're feeling kind of carefree, you're feeling relaxed. Anything on that side of the equation, that's good. So, and you just keep climbing that emotional ladder and getting used to, a lot of times too, we're not used to labeling how we're feeling. There's so many different ways that we all can just go wrong with this stuff because it's not taught. It's so confusing. So with emotions, We tend to have kind of a limited vocabulary as far as how we describe how we're feeling. Most people kind of limit it to like, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, happy, sad, mad, tired, guilty, mm, excited. But like, there's a lot of gray area between those feelings. And so uh, it can help. There's different lists online of like emotions, lists of different adjectives of this is ways people feel, and it can be helpful to go take a look at one of those. Maybe Jack, if you're still around, if you could go to Google and look up like emotion list of emotions or something like that, and put a link in the chat so people could you know, click on it and kind of see. Thank you. If you would be so kind. Uh, but that can be helpful. And then to go through the list and be like, okay, um, thinking what time at different, thinking of different experiences in your life that you have felt that way. And maybe you've never even realized it. Okay, cool. Magalodora says, yeah, thank you, Dana. That makes sense. Yes, I agree. Elizabeth says energy works in a flow. If you're around a narcissist or draining person, you'll feel it. The idea is to get your flow of energy going towards nurturing activities instead of an endless vacuum. Yes. So, yeah, if you think about, okay, where is your energy level? How are you feeling in certain situations around certain people? Uh, you know, certain things you have to do, and noticing, okay, gosh, whenever I leave this person's company, I just feel really drained. And kind of why is that? Kind of what is it about this situation that's just not that's draining me instead of nourishing me? Ava says, this is why I do not trust myself. The good men I chased away thinking they were bad, and the bad men I ran into thinking they were awesome. I think that is the situation that most of us have found ourselves in. I guess I would look for patterns. So if I were you, I would think about, how did these hurtful people fly under your radar? What were their patterns of behavior? For a lot of people, men and women, it tends to be, it goes back to this idea of we think we can spot a dangerous and destructive person. And so we let our guard down around people that come across as the opposite, that come across as like nice and likable and charming and charismatic and all of that, where we can be very quick to let our guard down because we're mistaking that niceness for goodness. And that was my situation twice, where th- they were completely sociopathic. Their behavior it's kind of the Bill Cosbys of the world, putting on this really great facade and being pathological liars, and just the level of deceit and deception and lies and just nonsense. It was crazy. So over the top. I'd like to think that I would see that kind of stuff coming nowadays, or that I wouldn't even give either one of them um, a second date, even. But it's sometimes these things just take. Sometimes people can hide their behavior really well. Let's see here. Um, Huffle Mom says, "Hey Dana, Jack's narcissistic grandmother died earlier this week. Jack doesn't want to attend the funeral, but his parents are forcing him to go. Can you offer him some suggestions?" I guess this is difficult. W- I mean, you're an adult. He's an adult. How are they forcing him to go? What are the consequences if he doesn't go? Here's the other thing too, Ava, with dangerous and destructive people. Um, there's so many lessons in all of this. And again, it's not just you, it's not just me. It's I think anybody can get roped into this because this is so counter to to what all of us are taught. You know, everybody's kind of taught, basically that niceness equals goodness, and that, you need to forgive and forget, and that family means everything, and that commitment's forever, and that love conquers all, and you've got to, trust like you've never been hurt. There's all kinds of these cliches that are thrown out that just hook people and get us tangled up into like really bad situations. And we think we're doing the right thing because all of these platitudes are passed around as the right thing to do. They're passed around as truths, and they're not. They're really dangerous. So, um, with problematic people out there, it's just important that we set the pace, and it helps to learn to reestablish that connection with yourself of of acknowledging acknowledging when something is uncomfortable and when something is comfortable for you. And I know, girl, I know. After these situations, it feels like somebody took a magnet to your internal compass, and you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Everything makes me uncomfortable. I feel like everything's a red flag. That's part of it. And so realizing, okay, like my internal compass is just all over the place right now, and just to start small, to start with that 0 to 10 scale. So you're getting back in tune with things. There's also a concept that is in the book Psychopath Free that I absolutely love. Calls it the concept of a constant. And in the book, he refers to his cat as his constant. Um, and my brother is my constant. So what a constant is, it's basically, I think it's maybe more helpful to have a person than an animal, but whatever works for you. Uh, a person or an animal that you feel consistently consistent around, that you feel, cool, calm, and collected. So again, in my situation, my brother, I've known him his whole life, and we've had a very good relationship. I trust him completely. Um, he's he's always shown that I can trust him, that I can rely on him, that he's in my corner. And because of that, if I ever when I if because there was quite a time, I mean, a handful of years where I was right where you are, where I doubted everything. Am, you know, um, am I being paranoid? Am I being hypervigilant? Or is this person, like, how do I know for sure? Like, are they a problem, or who has the problem? Is it their behavior, or is it me and my unresolved stuff? And using that concept of a constant really helped, because then it made me realize, you know what? I don't always feel this anxious, unhinged, nervous, stressed out. I don't normally feel like this, or I don't always feel like this. So it's not necessarily me that's feeling this way, uh, just because of my past. I don't feel this way around certain people. And I don't feel in particular, I don't feel this way when I'm around like emotionally mature, uh, open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented um, behavior that involves like dignity and respect. I feel emotionally safe when I'm around people that have emotionally safe behavior. I feel anxious and unhinged and emotionally dysregulated when I'm not feeling safe. That's kind of that fight or flight mode that gets kicked off, and I want to get out of there. So if you're fresh out, I would just encourage you, you don't need to have all of the answers, but start thinking about your emotions and your actions in that way of, okay, there have been times where you feel, I would say safe enough. How about that? Where you feel safe enough that you feel calm enough, normally around um, possibly a good friend, a sibling, um, you know, yeah. And then kind of take that with you and then notice when you're feeling like, that's odd, or that's weird, or that's not cool. It's those feelings of, it registers as like mild discomfort. It's the, that's weird, that's odd. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't I don't think I like that. That's not okay with me. You start feeling like that's off because it's not okay with you on some level. And more often than not, it's because a legitimate boundary has been crossed. And then that's when we can either address it or we can just drive on. Does that help? Kenneth says, what if I don't have a constant? And Missouri Cowboy says, I didn't either, except for my pet rock. I felt constant around my pet rock. My pet rock is a very large boulder atop of a mountain here. I named him Grandfather Rock. I like that. So yeah, and Jack mentions I think it's possible for you to create yourself one. Yeah. So thinking about um thinking about that, Mr. Rogers. Now, granted, these are just TV personalities, right? Um, but thinking about for a lot of kids that didn't grow up with a safe environment, it tended to be shows, TV shows that was their safe place. Trying to think of some other shows that Reading Rainbow was a great show. Um, yeah, just kind of it's the common theme. You know what? One of my shows that I would say was probably one of my constants growing up was Star Trek. The Next Generation, of course, because it's fantastic. And that was my like everything is right with the world kind of place. I just loved that show so much. And this is the first time I've actually really thought of it this way, but it's because on that show, that whole crew, there was that level of trust between all of them. And there was that level, and it had been earned. There was that level of emotional safety there. They supported each other. They were able um, to communicate. They were respectful of differences, and they worked well as a team. Whenever there were issues that came up, they were handled, and it it was just kind of showing, um, you know, a healthy dynamic. And then you had characters that were a little rough around the edges, like Worf, for example, if you're a fan of the show. And but even with him, that he was able to to still communicate effectively, and they worked. I don't know, it all worked, and I really liked that. That was just I think a great it was just a great show. Tammy says, I had this feeling like something was off. He kept saying it was my own issues from childhood trauma. Trusting my instincts has always been an issue. It's a work in progress. Yeah. And here's the thing too is um uh with that, with the feeling like something was off, what I've also found from people is that and myself included, but when they learn more about like manipulative behavior and they expand their vocabulary, they begin to have the words to describe what they're experiencing. It no longer is so vague. It's no longer so nebulous of, oh, something's just off. It's nope, that's gaslighting, or that's diminishing, or that's demeaning, or that's belittling, or that's invalidating, or that's minimizing, or that's rude. Like, or that's verbally abusive, or that's emotionally abusive. We have more words, and the more words we have to describe something, the more it makes sense. But when we're struggling to understand, it's of course a person's going to be confused because if you don't have the vocabulary to describe what you're experiencing. So that's that's a really big part of healing, I think, is to learn about that vocabulary. Um, you can go to my website at thriveafterabuse.com, and I forget which tab it is, but there's a tab that has to do with definitions and such. And it's not I mean, there's quite a few on there. I didn't want to drown people in definitions, but it's a good start. So that's a good resource, I think, in my opinion. My first book called Start Here, and you can find all of my books on pretty much anywhere by looking for Dana Morningstar. That book, Start Here, has even more definitions and examples and frequently asked questions and all kinds of stuff. So that really helps because it's so exciting, I guess would be the word, uh, to see people when they first kind of get here, or they've been here for a little while, and they start like, oh, I had a funny feeling something was off, or that was kind of a red flag. And then reading, they start learning more about this. They're watching videos, they're whatever they're doing, they're reading books, they're listening to podcasts, what have you. And then they get the words for it, and then they're able to articulate it. And once they're able to articulate it, they're better equipped with, then how do I handle this? Is this something where asserting myself is appropriate, or is this something that it's within my deal breakers? But again, this stuff's not taught. And it's not something that's, you know, we get it kind of trained out of us as we're kind of indoctrinated into society. So the good news is so much of healing isn't about becoming something different. It's about becoming more of who you already are. It's about getting rid of all of this disempowering messages and garbage that just gets piled on us over time through culture and religion and family and friends and media and music and well-intended bad advice and you name it. Yeah, Kevin saying, yeah, getting rid of these disempowering messages. Yeah, it's huge. Elizabeth says, I know it's controversial, but society actually teaches us to become the perfect supply and enabler. Society does, you know? It really does. Because all for men and women, there's these expectations of this is just how things are. For women, I don't know, to be a good, like a loving wife, you basically need to be a doormat, which is not true, right? Or for men, your value is only in how much hair you have or how much money you make. That's terrible. I mean, there's just terrible messages that are put out there. That's cool. JJ says, "Yeah, wow, Dana, I get the same comfort from Star Trek Next Generation reruns in the background too, because it was a safe place and time back then." Yep. Yeah, that show is just wonderful. Grace says, "Narcissism flies under the radar. I don't have tolerance or forgiveness for him. Can you speak to that?" Oh, okay. There's a beginning part to this. Is it Dana? I have two dads. One has overtly narcissistic tendencies, but has well intentions. I tend to tolerate and forgive him now that I understand the behaviors I see. The other dad is covert, and his narcissism flies under the radar. I don't have tolerance or forgiveness for him. Can you speak to that? Well, I agree with you and support you on you're looking at intentions. And this whole concept of emotional health and wellness, I guess, any value on emotional health and wellness is a fairly new thing. And especially with people of different generations, they don't have that level of, I should say, more often than not, that level of self awareness, that level of, um, emotional health, of understanding your emotions, of valuing your emotions, of valuing having peace in your life and all of that. That wasn't a thing. It was, you know, you did what was expected. And um yeah, so there was just a lot of dysfunction. So people grew up stunted. I think of it as if you had a bunch of houseplants and they that all needed full sun and they were on the shady side of the house, they're just they're not gonna grow to what they could have, and they just have limitations. My father, um, he had overtly narcissistic tendencies, but by and large, he was well intended, and he truly was just this product of his environment. And the older I get and the more I learn about emotional health and wellness, it just makes me so sad. And all of him and his two brothers in that house, and it makes me sad for his parents. It makes me sad for anybody that grows up um just stunted like that, you know? So I think looking at intentions is important. It's when their actions might be seemingly kind and good and they're doing all the right things, but their intentions, like, oh, they're actually really in this because they have their strings attached, or because they're trying to look like a good person, or because of whatever, then yeah, I don't blame you. Like, you can't trust a person like that because their intentions aren't good. They're manipulative. So I wouldn't have tolerance for that either. And forgiveness, as far as forgiveness goes, that's one of those words and concepts that I think really gets people into a lot of trouble. Um, the way I like to think of forgiveness is it's about releasing anger, releasing hard feelings. And this isn't about allowing somebody back into your life. So, and forgive, and they say, oh, like, forgiveness is about you. That's kind of what that refers to. It's about, like, I have a lot of hurt feelings. I have a lot of anger about what happened. It's righteous anger. It's a righteous hurt. Anybody that was on the receiving end of certain behavior would feel that way. And if they didn't, then you'd have to kind of wonder, like, what's like, what's wrong with them? Like, why are they so out of tune with their emotions that they would be okay with being victimized like that? So, um, if we're hurt by somebody's behavior, we can work towards releasing, to um, foregoing, I guess, like foregoing that anger and that hurt. It's a process and it takes time to authentically get there. It's not just uttering the phrase, "Oh, I forgive you," out loud or to ourselves or any of that. It's a process and it requires work, and it involves, you know, it involves a lot. It involves seeing their behavior as a reflection of them and not a reflection of us. Involves seeing them as, okay, this is this person's limitations, and yeah, it involves, um, I think, to some degree, having compassion for the other person and being like, wow, this is just really tragic. It's really tragic that this person is just so damaged. But again, this does not mean that we have to have allowance for that or that we have to let this person back into our life. If they still have the same behavior and they're not sincerely apologetic or accountable for, especially if they're not accountable, if they're not sincerely accountable for it, if they haven't taken the actions, not just the words, if they haven't taken the corrective action to make sure that it won't happen again, then it's a terrible idea to let them back into our lives because they're going to keep hurting us. So yeah. And because forgiveness, it's a process. Um, Again, that it's just such an emotionally charged topic because people, after somebody's been hurt in some sort of way, um, they oftentimes they don't really know. Other people don't know what to say. And so then again, they kind of just spout out these cliches of, oh, well, you need to forgive. Oh, it's important that you forgive them. That's one of the most invalidating, uh, inconsiderate things you can tell a person who's been victimized is right off the bat, well, you need to forgive. Like that, it's, ay, ay, ay. So, um, you don't need to do anything. I mean, you can hold on to that anger and that hurt the rest of your days if you want to, but you can also release it and you can also realize that it's your anger and your hurt is justified and reasonable given what happened, but that you don't need to hold on to it to keep yourself safe. Does that make sense? That you can realize, yeah, this should not have happened to me, and but I'm not gonna let this hurt and this anger destroy my life. Let's see here. Ava says, what if it's not in their personality to apologize or be vocal about their accountability? Um, well, I get it. Just it depends. It depends. If you're considering letting a person back into your life, especially back into your inner circle, then I think it's reasonable and appropriate to expect some sort of conversation to happen and some sort of level of accountability to happen where they, you know, acknowledge what they've done and and are accountable for it and work to correct it. If they can't even do that, then they wouldn't be back in my inner circle because they they aren't. going to be able to do the work necessary to repair the damage they've done. Um, Now, if it's in terms of, you know, releasing anger, releasing hurt, that kind of thing, that's when when you hear people say, this is about you, it's not about the other person, and that you don't need an apology for forgiveness, that's more along the lines of what they're talking about in terms of, um, we don't, it's nice to get an apology. It's nice, for somebody to own up to what they've done, but we don't need that in order to move forward and work towards releasing our hurt and anger. We can do that by just acknowledging we're hurt, we're angry. It's understandable that we're hurt and angry. And um, because they did something hurtful. And um, but we're going to channel that pain into something positive because we're not going to let it ruin our life. So I'm so sorry for the barking dog. I have no idea what's going on upstairs. It just sounds like chaos. Chaos is ensuing. Gareth says, Dana, is everything okay in your house? I I don't know. I don't know what's going on upstairs. They're doing road construction, so I'm guessing that's part of it, but it could be people walking their dogs. Who's to say? That's a really interesting point, Alicia. She says, apologizing is so difficult. I feel like it's used as a childhood punishment. And that's part of the reason why it's so hard to apologize as an adult. Yeah, that makes that makes sense. That would make sense. And again, this stuff's not taught. Like these are, to me, these are like basic life skills. We all mess up. We all make mistakes. We all, um, you know, can cross other people's boundaries accidentally. These things happen. There's dozens of times, hundreds of times probably throughout our life of things that we need to apologize for. And learning how learning how to be accountable, how to be appropriately accountable. And just all of the boundaries, like where we start and where we start and end, and where another person starts and ends, and what's really our stuff and what's their stuff, and what's appropriate for us to be accountable for, and what's not our stuff to be accountable for, like what's their stuff, and um, you know, and how to actually what constitutes a good apology, and um, you know, all of that. It's not taught to the degree that it really needs to be. But it's been my experience with apologizing and being accountable, and I guess with any type of like functional, like mature, like emotionally mature skills that I've learned over time. Once we start doing them, it becomes easier and easier. And because these are, we if you think about behavior in terms of dysfunctional and functional, and in its most simple terms. So dysfunctional meaning it is not functional. It's not working as it should be. And functional meaning it is something is working as it should be. So if we have dysfunctional behavior, things are very difficult. You're driving a car with a flat tire. It's everything is it's just that much more difficult because the tools that we need to be using to get through life aren't adequate. They're not functioning to the level that they need to be. When we can start being honest with ourselves and doing that self-work and realizing our strengths and weaknesses and what areas that are imbalanced, you know, uh, that we can work to improve. Things start working, and when things start working, you don't want to go back to things not working. So it becomes smoother and smoother. You get air in your tire. You're like, oh my God, I cannot believe like I did this entire drive on a flat tire. Like, no wonder it was so difficult and noisy and uncomfortable and, um, you know, all of it. Like, I don't want to do that again. It's things just work better when they're functional. And so, same thing with apologizing when we can get that skill down of, okay, a sincere apology means acknowledging what we did wrong, and then coming up with some sort of plan of how we're going to work on it or how it's not going to happen again. So, a sincere apology isn't just the words that are said, it's the actions that are taken. And yeah, but you're right. When we're kids, apologizing there tends to be a lot of shaming that goes on with apologizing and and that screws up people too, not just the shaming, but forcing apologies or the idea of, oh, well, you need to be friends with everybody or, oh, um, kind of hug and make up, forgive and forget kind of thing. Like sometimes people out there do really hurtful things and they need to be completely cut out of a person's life. It doesn't matter if they're family. It doesn't matter if you've known them for 20 years. It doesn't matter. If they're dangerous and destructive, it's it's healthy and appropriate to be self-protective. Um, Jennifer asks, why have psychiatrists stopped doing talk therapy and only divvy out drugs? Wouldn't it be best if they knew your intimate problems in order to figure out what medications you need to be on? I guess I don't understand why they would want a secondhand account from a separate therapist to know what to give you. Oh, that's a huge question, Jennifer. And it has a lot to do with insurance and how in demand psychiatrists are. So psychiatrists normally, they're medical doctors who are focused in basically, like most doctors, medication management and their specialty happens to be psychiatric, um, mental illness, basically mental illness. So that's their job. Medication, medical management of mental illness is their primary thing. And therapists um, of any kind, psychotherapists, their focus is more on the psychotherapy part of it. So it is more of that talk therapy. I mean, again, like a lot of it too it's demand and it has to go back to like insurance billing and a lot of psychiatrists are backed up 3-6 months out. Um, the standard appointment time is generally like 20 minutes. So it's in and out. And they're there to focus more on the pharmacology of treatment and not the psychotherapy. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's definitely, a needed thing. And um, but the challenge is a lot of people go to a psychiatrist thinking that they're going to get intensive psychotherapy, and that's not the case the vast majority of the time. I don't think that's been the case for a long time. So, um, yeah. So yeah, that tends to be why that is. Let's see here. Um, Let me scroll up here. Okay, Huffle Mom is talking about Jack and his grandmother's funeral and says, all I know is last time Jack didn't want to go to a funeral, his dad called us and talked him over for 15 to 30 minutes. Funerals are about family. I was so mad. Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, I guess it just it depends. Every action has consequences, and it's weighing weighing that and, taking that into consideration when you're making these decisions. So, is it a situation where he can say, "You know what? Um I had a very difficult relationship with her, and I plan to kind of make my peace in my own way or on my own time schedule?" Like, what would be the fallout from something like that? Um, and if that just really wasn't a possibility and there were consequences and, um, they wouldn't support your decision and on and on. Sometimes even though I'm not a fan of lying, but I think in situations like these, sometimes kind of giving out an additional excuse that's less arguable, can sometimes work. So just saying, with COVID and everything, I'm just not comfortable with groups. It's still within the range of a reasonable way, reasonable reason to not go. Let's see here. Kevin says, I hate using the simple term evil, but honestly, that's the root problem with the dark triad. Yeah. Yeah. I think the word evil gets mm, complicated, maybe gets complicated because there tends to be almost this like supernatural connotation when we talk about evil, like, you know, but I don't think evil has to be, and like have any ties to the supernatural. I think there's evil is very real and exists in the world. And if I guess if we just look at it in a simplistic way, what we think of good, when we think of things that are good, we think of empathy and compassion and kindness and understanding and appreciation and um, kind of nourishment, right? Like these are things that are good. This is kind of the signs of a good person. That, um, sincerity and all of that. Like this is wanting to help other people and um, just caring, compassionate, like these kinds of qualities. And evil would be like the polar opposite of good, which is the opposite of that. So it's lack of empathy, lack of remorse, lack of care, lack of compassion. It's this cold, cruel, calloused, indifferent treatment, oftentimes like malicious, sadistic, uh, you know, mistreatment of other people. It's taking delight in pain, the pain and suffering, the intentional pain and suffering of others. It's dark. It's really, it's so far away from what we think of when we think of kind of what makes us human, you know? Because really, I mean, human beings, it's um, that ability, like the empathy, the compassion, the care for one another, the connection, the sense of community, these kinds of things. And when a person doesn't have that, it's very strange. It's sort of like, you're like a lizard person, like you're like a crocodile. They're so far away from being human that it's hard to understand. Mm. Denora says, evil is to show yourself as friendly and then do harm. Yeah. Yeah. And UNA says, I have a hard time with evil too because of the connotation. So I stick with damaged and toxic. Yeah. Damaged, I think, is a good one. Uh, Deeply dysfunctional is, I like damaged because it takes away, there can be kind of also this, mm, kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? Kind of alluding to evil as being supernatural, evil as being powerful because it's supernatural. And it's not. It's evil behavior, it's weakness. It's emotionally immature. It's, you know, the, uh, uh, violence isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of weakness. Any form of violence, verbal violence, emotional violence, psychological, sexual, spiritual, physical, like you name it. It's here is a person who cannot cope and who has major issues, and that's their highest and best way of going about getting their needs met. That's sad. That's really sad. And there's a complete inability to form like uh deep connections to other people, deep meaningful connections to other people. Like that's sad. What a lonely existence. To just be so consumed with anger and hate and uh just ickiness. I don't know. Just what a waste. What a waste of a life. Brooke asks, "Can I be seen?" Yes. Yes, you can. Let's see if you I'm going to scroll up and if you have asked a question, I didn't see it. Magaladoro says, I can't relate to people without empathy. I just can't understand how people can lack simple empathy. I don't get it. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't either, especially a lack of empathy for mm, kind of like innocence or, yeah, like innocence or those that are really vulnerable. Like to me, that's a whole different level of evil. Harm against children or animals or elderly or, um, like intentionally targeting people that are freshly divorced or freshly, they recently lost a spouse. This kind of stuff. It's just, oh, it just makes me almost physically sick. Changing My Life says, I like how I heard someone put it. They are not even evil because to be evil, you have to have intent. They just have nothing there, which is worse because they will appear to be good to benefit themselves. And it's, I would say it's on a spectrum too. So, I think when we're talking more about hmm, pathological narcissism, but not to the point of malignant narcissism, just that blinding degree of selfish, the lack of empathy, the lack of regard. Um, oh, yeah, just blinding degree of selfishness kind of thing. It's oftentimes not uh, intentional. They're just very self-absorbed for whatever reason, generally due to some sort of childhood trauma, like not getting certain needs met, or being overindulged. But the more malicious behavior, the intentional malicious, the con artists of the world, you know, the predators of the world, where it is malicious and intentional, that kind of stuff is just a whole different level of dark, and they do have intent, and it's just hard to understand how that can be. Oh, well, thank you, Kenneth. He says, for the live stream donation, he says, Dana, you have validated me and helped me mature as a person and improve my behavior and my relationships. You deserve more subscribers and donations. I can't possibly thank you enough. Oh, I am so glad that I'm just thrilled that this channel's been able to that I've been able to help you in some sort of way to have a positive impact in your life. Like, that's just really cool. So, thank you. That is an interesting thought, Elizabeth. She says, evil seems to be an excess of energy directed outwards, the criticism, the aggression, instead of inwards towards self improvement or introspection. Yes. And I'm going to have to chew on that. I think that what you just said, I think could have some really profound implications. Because, yeah, you're thinking about, okay, well, how we all handle stress in or upset, uncomfortable feelings. Let's put it that way. Stress, anger, rejection, sadness, these kinds of things. And we tend to either internalize it or we tend to externalize it. Like, for example, years ago, 20 years ago or so, I used to work with at-risk kids. And I worked at a boys' home and then I worked at a girls' home. And it was very interesting because it was always, by and large, like 99% of the time, the same type of behaviors. The boys tended to be more, they would lash out. They were getting in fights. They were aggressive. Their anger was directed outside of them. The girls, it every now and again you'd get some girls that were fighters, but it was more internalizing. They were cutting. They um, you had a lot of eating disorders. You had suicide attempts. You had, um, you know, kind of those types of self-harm type behaviors. So, yeah, and I'm sure um, and I don't know why, I don't know. I don't know if that's more, if it's a hormone thing, if it's a testosterone thing or an estrogen thing, or if it's also like a social conditioning thing, that it's more acceptable for boys to be reactive, to be expressive with their anger, and it's more socially acceptable for girls not to be, or kind of what that's about. And then I guess the bigger question is what could be done about that? Could there be some, um, you know, what type of preventative programs could help with something like that? Because I think when we're talking about severe, like major vicious evil, like serial killers, um, a lot of them have come from horrific abuse, and they didn't they it was kind of a combination of factors, right? So like they just didn't have the coping skills, they didn't have the support system, they were growing up in these traumatic circumstances, uh, and somewhere along the line they got the idea of, this is how I'm going to channel all of this rage. And how, yeah, like what kind of interventions could be there? Because it's scary. I mean, it's scary to think that people could just be one or two decisions or one or two, um, they could be that easily impressionable that their life just takes a radical turn, and they do something. They shoot up a school. They become a serial killer. They do something horrific 'cause they can't handle that pain in their life. They can't handle their emotions. I don't know. So much of this to me just really goes back to uh, understanding emotions and talking about it and ensuring that, you know, um, abuse is identified for what it is and addressed. Yeah. Denora says integrating group communication skills in elementary, middle, and high school would give tools and maybe begin the work of prevention. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Right. Yeah. Life skills 101. Yep. Some type of um, starting at a young age, how to deal with frustration, anger, hurt feelings, rejection, uh, you know, these kinds of things. Let's see. Magalodora says, I'm really sorry I have to go. I have an appointment, but we'll watch the rest later. Looking forward to next week very much. Thank you. Have a wonderful night. I think I'm going to sign off here shortly as well because I can feel my voice going. So uh, I need my voice for the rest of this week. But thanks for being here, Magalodora. We'll see you next week. Yeah, Kevin says, Dana, thanks for reminding me of the thoughtlessness of their actions. The thoughtlessness of the actions of narcissists. It really is tragic. It's their limits. I don't need to bring supernatural into it, which just muddies the waters. Yeah. And I know it can definitely feel like that. And who knows? Maybe it is. Maybe there isn't a supernatural component to it. I don't know. But um, regardless, they're not these, you know, all powerful creatures. They're just an ill-formed emotional being. I mean, it really it takes, I think, uh, and I'm not saying, oh, I have a kind of this bleeding heart, like level of compassion and tolerance for this kind of behavior. Don't get me wrong. I think the only way that they're ever gonna to grow and to develop is to for people to not be tolerant, for people to not enable that kind of behavior and to make excuses for it and whatever. Like, yeah, it's understandable. A person grows up in a horrific home, with horrifically abusive parents. We get it. When we hear that they've gone out and done something horrific, we're like, yeah, makes complete sense. Like we all saw that coming. Doesn't excuse it. And uh, it I don't know. There just needs to be more done there to kind of catch, um, the stuff before it festers and really just destroys a person. JJ says, I'm reading books about evil now to learn what evil thinks and does and not to do it, to be aware and protect myself, because I am so naive. Have you have you listened to or read my third book, The Narcissist Playbook, JJ? And also just FYI, you guys can get um, most of my books too. You can contact your local library. A lot of local libraries also have um, audiobooks, like an audiobook app called Hoopla that they use. So you can listen to it for free if cost is a concern. So that's something to consider. But that my book, The Narcissist Playbook, really goes into that. about different types of manipulation, different types of manipulative people, and then what like different um, personality traits and character traits that are frequently manipulated, and what we can do about it, like how to keep yourself safe. Um, oh, it's interesting. I guess it wouldn't really surprise me. Gareth says, 40% of the American police force have sociopathic tendencies. 40%! Exclamation point, exclamation point. Yep. And I think it's worth kind of touching on, though. I would be curious to know what they're measuring, because here's the thing. Yes, you have people, there's probably a good chunk of people that get into being a police officer that um, are really driven by the power and control. It's their way of feeling powerful and in control, is to dominate other people. So you have that level of kind of concerning personality that tends to be drawn to that type of career field. But I think even for the person that wants to join the police force, or because they care, and they're like, I want to clean up crime. I grew up in a bad neighborhood. I want to make the world a safer place. Like, they have good intentions. They're about like building up communities and making places safer. They're not about this domination and kind of respect my authority kind of power trip. That's not them. The challenge is when you deal with nothing. I mean, not nothing, but the vast majority of time, you're just dealing with the underbelly of society. You're dealing with the worst of the worst day in and day out. You get, I would imagine, this level of emotional detachment. I mean, I know you get as a nurse, as a medic, whenever you're dealing with stuff, and it can really be shocking to other people, because there's this um, kind of mm, is this emotional distance you have to events, because it's day in and day out. You're dealing with, you know, you name it, horrific things: murder, suicide, rape, you know, child, child trafficking, just all day, every day. And it can really, lead to burnout and lead to being bitter and jaded and stuff, because that becomes your new normal. It doesn't negatively impact you as much as it does the next person, like the average person who is a school teacher, or, an artist, or somebody who like doesn't doesn't work in, you know, with kind of the general public in that capacity. So and I would think that that could also kind of register as sociopathic, because there is this level of detachment that, and I think that just that's, um, and not in a malicious, cruel, or hurtful way. I don't, I guess what I'm saying is I would just be curious to see the studies and the questions, and, um, you know, at like where in their career were they being tested, and, is it more emotional detachment, kind of that lack of empathy and lack of, like, because to me, that's a lot of burnout, like lack of empathy, lack of remorse. Um, that's burnout. And that really happens in that kind of a field where it's just day in and day out dealing with, you know, a bunch of mayhem and foolishness. And I agree. I agree. Farah says, people can choose to be better, not bitter. Yes. Yes, I agree. But I think it helps when, and maybe they're doing this more for the military, I don't know. Um, this wasn't the case when my ex-husband was in the military, but maybe it is now, where there's more of a focus on, um, being proactive, like proactively discussing trauma and a trauma response instead of sending people, police, any field. I mean, there's a thing called vicarious trauma, and it's, when you're seeing stuff, horrific things day in and day out, it negatively impacts you. And whether a person realizes it or not, and I don't think a lot of people even realize it, because we feel like, oh, this shouldn't impact us. This is my job. But I was talking to a friend of a friend the other day, and she was a COVID nurse, and now they're just now closing down the unit at her hospital. But she was saying, they were having between 7 to 10 people getting on vents every single day. And she said it was so stressful and so traumatic. And she was like, the PTSD is going to be high for all of the medical personnel that was on that COVID floor, because it's just too much. And most places, they don't, um and again, like, times are changing, things are getting a little bit better. They normally now they'll encourage people to go seek counseling. Most insurance, most companies will cover like 3 to 5 sessions. Um, there's this encouragement there, but I still think there needs to be a lot more done, where the discussion about coping skills and how are you handling this, and here's kind of common personality changes after trauma, and here's what to look for, and here's how we can address them, and uh, all of that. Because really, I mean, nobody wants to be bitter, you know. I think bitterness is something that just tends to happen when people, I think, don't know how to get better. And and going through traumatic events, it can really feel like you just get stuck in quicksand and you don't see a way out, and you don't know how to feel anything other than bitterness. Let's see. Let me. Yeah, Jennifer says, the police force is kind of like religious people in positions of power in their churches. There are a lot of good people, but at the same time, there are a lot of people that seek out those positions for easy access to victims. And it's always the bad ones that blow the biggest stink, and it makes their communities look bad. Yeah. And it's tragic. There's some just really rotten people in every field that make every field look bad. And, I hope that, I don't know. It'd be great if that kind of behavior was identified. There were just better ways of identifying it and addressing it, and getting rid of those people early on before they can do a tremendous amount of damage. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Farrah's Journey says, I love your red lipstick and always the valuable information you share with others. Yes, thank you. In all fairness, I will say, I think there must be some sort of filter on Zoom. I did not set it, but um, I don't look like this. The lipstick that I'm wearing is not this dark. So I don't know, it's weird, but I'm just going with it. Yeah, I don't know what this filter I wish I could have this in real life. Like, it makes my hair look a lot shinier, and it makes my skin look a lot clearer, and yeah, it's great. But no, I don't look like this. Uh, Ava says, I've lost that silly voice inside that says, but what if I'm mistaken? Now I see red flags and I run. Yeah. This is such a big shift for so many people because again, society teaches us like you don't want to be rude. Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't um don't be too hasty when making decisions. What if you miss out on a great person? You really should be friends with everybody. These kinds of things, and that gets people in trouble. And I'm not saying that and here's where we get hung up is then we feel, "Oh, well, I don't want to be judgmental," right? And realizing this is not about being judgmental. It's about discernment, and it's about your own comfort level. And we don't so it's releasing that need for concrete proof that something is in fact a problem before we take action with it. Again, this is something that's not taught, and it's a it should be a crime that it's not taught because it's basic self-protection. 101. So let's take a situation that could be neutral. Okay? You're walking in a parking lot late at night. You that are at the grocery store, you had this craving for Pop-Tarts at 2 a.m., right? And you're walking out to your car and you hear footsteps and you become very unnerved. You don't need to keep walking and think, well, I don't know what their intentions are. What if they're just in a hurry? Or, what if they're parked next to me? Or what if? It doesn't matter. We don't have to determine what another person's intentions are. We don't have to decide if they're good or bad. This isn't about being rude. It's not being judgmental. It's about realizing, this isn't comfortable for me. I just don't feel comfortable with with footsteps rapidly approaching. That's it. That's all you need to know. And so based on that, we can do any number of things. We could um, turn around and face the person. We could cross the parking lot. We could turn around and go back into the store. We could grab mace if we have it. We could um, you do what you not saying mace the person, but you could just have the mace in your hand. You're doing what you need to do in order to get back to that level of comfort. So if that level of again, it's kind of like that lukewarm when we're comfortable, it's like lukewarm water. We don't even notice. It's just comfortable. When we're not comfortable, it's that constant feeling that something's off. Think about when physically if you have a toothache, if you have a mild headache, if you tweaked your ankle, um, you stubbed your toe, it doesn't have to be major. It's these signs of something's off. We need to pay attention to that. It's important. And so emotionally, it's because we don't know for certain. That's where we all get so tripped up. We don't know if that person behind us if they're in a hurry or if they're walking to their car or if they're planning on attacking us. But if the only way that we do know is for them to actually attack us, then that's not a good way of going about things. So all any of us can do is err on the side of caution and be like, okay, this is what we're experiencing. How do you feel about it? Uncomfortable? Comfortable. And being honest with ourselves too. Like, yeah, that makes me feel uneasy. Maybe that's a better word. Uneasy. This makes me feel uneasy. Okay, what needs to happen? And I will tell you most of the time, and let me say a few things about this. When people tend to feel uneasy, it's because the other person has unsettling behavior. That's why. Like, you're not just pulling this out of thin air. I'd say more often than not, it's because the other person has squirrely behavior. You know, they're doing stuff that doesn't sit right with you. And again, it's not even about, are they really doing something, is needing concrete proof. It's not even about that. It's there's something going on here. Let's say in a relationship, and you're like, you know what? Let's say, for example, the person that you're with um has they spend a lot of time with their ex, and they keep saying, "Oh, this, he or she is just a friend, just a friend, just a friend." And you're not okay with that. Well, that's fine. Like, that can be a deal breaker. That's perfectly fine. You don't need It doesn't mean that you're being judgmental. It doesn't mean that you're being old-fashioned. It doesn't mean uh it's about having discernment of, this is what works and doesn't work in my life. Maybe they are friends. That's fine. It's still If it's still not okay with you, you're like, that still bothers me. I don't and this was a big thing for me in my life, um, was backing up my standards and being like, I don't need my deal breakers and stuff don't need to be extreme. It doesn't need to be like physical abuse or um, cheating or, you know, stealing. Like, it doesn't need to be extremes. Back it up. If it's uh, crazy making, if it's perpetual confusion, if it's mental anguish, if it's chronic anxiety, uh, chronic stress, I don't want that in my life either. So, and the good news is that the chronic stress, the anxiety, the crazy making, the perpetual um, confusion, all of that, those tend to be the early warning signs of something bigger downstream, like something bigger is coming. So if you back it up, then you don't need concrete proof, because you're like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is a big deal, maybe it's not, but you know what? It doesn't really matter, because either way, I don't do perpetual confusion, and I don't do situations that cause crazy making and mental anguish, and I peace in my life. Like, that's the goal. Like, that's my minimum. I need peace in my life. And because we can't control the behavior of other people, all we can control is our behavior, our response to their behavior. So if you have a person that's crazy making in your life, let's say it's a coworker, doing what you need to do in order to have that not take a negative toll on your life. And sometimes that might mean doing something as extreme as looking for a different job. But I guarantee you, at the end of your life, you're never going to look back and think, "Oh, I really wish I would have stayed in that awful situation longer." Like, you're not going to be thinking that. So making, I want to have peace in my life. Like, that's a top priority. And that's the top priority, but it's also the minimum requirement. So this is my level of calm and peace. Things I bring into it, they're at that like 9 or 10 more often than not, except for this phone case. They're at a 9 or a 10. They're nourishing, they're bringing things into my life. So they're adding to it. So it's not just a sense of calm and peace, it's also a sense of enjoyment. Does that make sense? Oh, another okay, great. Ava was saying, yes, this is what I meant by examples. This really cements points for me. Okay, great. Um, cha. Ava, two, if you are into audiobooks or reading books, I've written 3. You can find all of them by looking for Dana Morningstar at Amazon or your local library or wherever. Um, and I know I'm biased, but I think that they're all full of a lot of examples, and I think that they're all helpful. At least I hope that they're all helpful. So that might be something to do or something to consider. What was I gonna say? Oh, the emotional discomfort. I've been seeing a lot of this lately, and it makes me really sad and nervous because I guess I just didn't really realize how prevalent of an issue this was. But what I've been seeing a lot of is people who something's wrong in their life, right? Something's not working, something's dysfunctioning in their life. Something's dysfunctional in their life. They get into therapy, or they start doing self-help stuff because they're trying to make their life work, right? Makes sense. And then they somewhere along the lines stumble onto, uh, I would say mainly cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's the connection between like your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. And yes, it's powerful, it's game changing, it's awesome. However, again, without an accurate or functional understanding of like boundaries, standards, deal breakers, accountability, um, without without that context, it can really get a person off base big time. And the worst thing is they don't even realize it because they're thinking, oh, well, my thought is that this person is cheating on me. And that's the thought of, oh, they must be cheating on me. Um, but then they'll try to analyze, they'll try to look for kind of what is the supporting evidence for this thought. Oh, because they don't have concrete proof, then they jump to, well, I don't know if they're cheating on me. And it's this weird way of like gaslighting themselves. Um, well, I don't know if they're cheating on me. And then they kind of jump to, I bet it's due to my past. I bet it's due because I have my ex cheated on me. And so now I'm just hyper vigilant. And when in reality, what might be going on is this person's got some behavior that you're not okay with. Maybe they're on their phone at all hours. Maybe they're being really extra secret. Maybe they're just being secretive with their phone, or they're hiding it, or they're just doing stuff that is suspicious and uncomfortable. That kind of behavior, that um, that behavior does not build emotional safety in a relationship. And so it's reasonable and appropriate that you would feel uncomfortable with that and that you would feel suspicious and distrusting. Anybody would in that situation. Anybody that's paying attention would, I should say. So we don't even need to wait to see, is this person in fact cheating? Like, it's enough if they have all this squirrely behavior, if you bring it up and then they start getting defensive and argumentative and, um, they deflect back onto you and now they're blaming you. And now you feel like all of a sudden you're having to defend yourself for random things, or it goes so far off track. That in itself is a huge issue. The fact that issues aren't able to be addressed and discussed and resolved. The underline the and resolved part. Because here's the thing is this is another thing I see a lot of people do. They're like, "Oh, well, it's these people you're living in the past. I'm living in the past. These old issues keep coming up. I wish I could just get over it. What's wrong with me that I can't get over it?" And the reality is it's not old issues that come up, it's unresolved issues that come up. Once that issue is resolved, which means generally accountability and transparency as far as what's really going on, and doing the work to ensure that to rebuild whatever trust might have been broken. When that happens, that issue no longer comes up. But again, when we're not making that connection between our our emotions and our environment, it feels like these things are very disconnected. It feels like, well, I'm just feeling really insecure. My mother, she was abusive. That's probably why I'm feeling insecure, because this person reminds me of my mother, or it's because of the childhood I had growing up. When that might be part of it, but it also might be very much what's going on in the moment. So I guess the point being is, watch out for that. So just because you're feeling unsettled about a situation or about someone's behavior, uh, it I really feel it's very rarely, um, or maybe, I don't know. I think that at least 50% of the time, it's something that's actually going on that that person just doesn't have the vocabulary to describe. And so that's where their confusion is, and they're looking for concrete proof. And so all they can grab at is something feels off. And then they're trying to make sense of it in the best way they can. But because they don't have concrete proof, then they're like, well, I must be making a big deal out of nothing, or I must have my own unresolved issues, or what have you. But I hope you can see if you can shift, if you can kind of back it up a little bit and shift your understanding of what your definition is of what a problem is, and realize it's something, perpetual, um, crazy making, perpetual confusion, mental anguish, uh, circular conversations, stuff that doesn't get crazy making, stuff that does not get resolved. That stuff is a problem. Like, that is concrete proof. That's all the proof that you need. So if your new standard is, I need peace in my life, then that's a good North Star of, yeah, I need sanity. I need to feel safe and sane. That's not asking too much. It really isn't. Fatima, yes, I did. And your younger sister was on here earlier, and I told her I would email you. Um, yeah, I've got some stuff to email you, and I will do that I'm winding down here. It's almost 11 o'clock. I will do that probably first thing tomorrow morning. Let's see here. Yeah, Jack is saying 35 plus years of therapy. It was all rooted in CBT. I don't think CBT is necessarily wrong. It just wasn't enough for me. I feel like DBT filled the gaps where CBT left off. Yeah. Um, I think there's a lot right with both of those therapeutic approaches. What what I really like about the dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT, there's a couple of things I really like about it. And um, one, it's a structured approach. I think that's really, really key, because it works. It's sort of like uh, the 12 steps, different AA, NA, OA, you name it. These are they have this format because they have found over time that this is what works. If you deviate from it, the effectiveness rate just plummets, or things spin into chaos. It's amazing. It's amazing. Like, all of the different ways things can go south when people start adding their own twist, eh, twist upon twist upon twist to things. And DBT, I think it's great. It addresses emotion. It addresses emotional, um, kind of maturity, emotional dysregulation, and it's like I really like that there's structure to it because with a lot of other therapies, and most practitioners in general have more of that eclectic approach where they're drawing from different modalities, and I get it, I understand it, and I think for the most part it's appropriate, right? Like you're not going to if somebody's experiencing grief, you're not going to probably uh, work with them in like with a solutions focused format or with CBT. There's different approaches. Different approaches are appropriate for different um, challenges that a person's facing. So, but uh, yeah. So I don't know. I'm just going off on a tangent there. But that's what I say. But when a person's picking and choosing, you're kind of picking and choosing different techniques from different therapies, then it kind of becomes muddled, and then it can be kind of confusing because then you get people like, oh yeah, I do CBT, but their version, how they do CBT versus how CBT see cognitive behavioral therapy instead of how cognitive behavioral therapy was supposed to be done, then all of a sudden become two very different things and it becomes muddled and very confusing. So, okay. So with that, I'm going to sign off. I've got a little dog who is crying upstairs. I have no idea what's going on. Keep your fingers crossed that things aren't shredded. And uh, you guys, hold on. You guys take care. Have a wonderful night. I will see you next week and just lots of love to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Okay. Good night.